Well, John left us, so we're going to bring in some new narrators now, and Mark Johnson and Glenn Melby. So I'll just let them take over here and give us some thoughts on sights from the old times, back about 1956 or thereabouts.
Well, Glenn, I'm the younger fellow here, so I'll start out, and maybe I can ask you a few questions here too. But remember those early shows on? I think the footage we're seeing here is probably 1956 at your dad's farm. Tell us right where that farm was at.
It's about 4.5 miles north and west of Ashby, almost halfway between Dalton and Ashby if you didn't take the old Highway 52.
Talk about that first show too, where didn't your dad, George, get the idea from going to see Joe Rinda's thrashing show in Montgomery, Minnesota, and Ralph and Kenneth?
Yes, he did. Yep.
Yeah.
See, Dad, George, and then Uncle Ralph, they had been steam threshers. They had routes around the Ashby-Dalton area for many years. So.
Seeing sights of the first show here, and we know some of the engines there. There you see a 25-horse Woods Brothers, and that was Nels Fusson's engine, wasn't it?
That's right.
And your dad's engine, your 25 Gar Scott, traded 80 acres of wild land up by Baudette for that engine. Is that right?
Well, he traded that in on it. Yes, he paid quite a bit of money at that time, also. But
these early shows too, Glenn. There we see the 25 Woods belting into the separator, but a lot of guys that were just starting up shows came and visited too. I think we saw a small miniature there, maybe a Norman Nelson bringing an advance or a case.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that was Norman Nelson I brought at that time. See, Norman started the Rolog show, and Norman and Dad and Ralph were good friends, and they exchanged quite a bit of information and attended each other's shows.
One of the engines has been at the show and still is there today is the 25 Double Gar Scott, and there's Ralph Melby. There you see the oiler operating too, but that was a great engine too to run, wasn't it? 175 pounds, double cylinder, made some good noise, huh?
Well, it was actually quieter and a little smoother, of course, than the single-cylinder Gar Scott, but Ralph had done a lot of work on that engine. My dad did own it. He and I remember the name of Albert Gilbertson actually owned that engine a year or two, I forget which it was. And then Ralph bought it from Dad. There
you see one of the miniatures coming down. That's a 22-horse scale model advance.
That's Norman Nelson operating that one.
Talk about the early show too, as far as just all the people that showed up. You didn't think that many were going to come, but all of a sudden there was 500 and then 1,000 or so.
Yes, it wasn't really advertised at all the first year, but we had about, I think there were six stacks of grain put up that year and threshed on on Dad's 80-acre farm.
There we see the 25 double Gar Scott popping off there at the same time too, but back in these days too, those engines were running close to full pressure, weren't they? And I think that Gar Scott ran around 175, that's what Cy was saying.
I remember Dad had our single 25 Gar Scott on the sawmill, and as I recall, he ran it at about 160 pounds most of the time.
Wow. Some plowing at the show too, and pony brake action. A teeter-totter as well, even at those early shows. That was fun to see what the engineers could do.
Well, you had to be used to your engine.
This 10-bottom plow here is real interesting too. That actually came by rail with a Twin Cities gas tractor that ended up down near Barrett. It was a 10-bottom John Deere plow. And we're looking at a one-cylinder engine here, aren't we? This is the 25-horse Advance that your dad had.
Yes.
Now we're talking a lot of horsepower to pull that plow through that tough Otter Tail County gumbo.
Well, it's heavy soil down there in St. Olaf Township, but because you have to remember, steam is 3 to 1. It's 3 horsepower. 1 horsepower steam was equal to 3 of gas, and so they were a 75 horsepower engine to 25 horse.
See that plow, they're doing a real fine job, and 2 shares on each of those levers. Took a few guys to run the platform too, didn't it, Glenn?
Yeah, you had to have five men on the platform.
We still do some plowing at our show occasionally as well, still with the 28-horse Minneapolis and the Rumley and others. But see the little slippage there on the tires, but that's a big load.
Well, that was heavy soil on that farm, so it pulled heavy.
There's another shot now, and I don't know if some of this is too, when the show moved, eventually it moved north of Dalton, just on the north side of town, didn't it, Glenn?
I believe so, yes.
Talk about some of the other early engineers too. Of course, there was your dad and Ralph and Kenneth Bradfield. But who are some of the other guys too?
Nels Fossen and
was Alvin Young around? And
Alvin Young usually operated the double-cylinder car Scott, and
Gilbert Kirkaby too. He had the 80
yes,
case later on. Yeah.
Yes, there's Kenneth Bradfield in a white hat or white cap there, and the other one looked like it could have been Kirkaby.
You know, you look at some of these pictures too, and most of these steam men are all gone, aren't they now too? And every so often you'll bump into someone who was an original engineer.
Yeah, but like you say, most of them are gone.
Here's Ralph Melby with the 25 double Gar Scott pulling up on the teeter-totter. And not just on the playground, but you watch here now, he'll get it. And a double cylinder is a lot easier to do this with. A single cylinder, much easier.
Single cylinder is very tricky. The double, you're never on dead center.
I love to watch. He'll have one leg up high there on the coal box, get it balanced, and you'll see someone just step on the back of the platform here in a minute, but see it rocking there. And we're looking at 25,000 pounds rocking on a, what is it, 6x6 maybe?
Yeah, if it's when they're full of water, they were actually right around 16 ton.
You just think of that. This engine too, I think we should let the viewers know. Ralph took the gearing and moved it to the other side of the engine, put a clutch on it from an old Mogul tractor. And it actually has a case flywheel on it, but when you think about doing all that without power tools, you look at an intermediate gear that's maybe, 24, inches in diameter. Amazing work, wasn't it?
Oh yes, and heavy shafting, and drill all those holes by hand, into that heavy casting.
Yeah, why did he do that? Well, the Gar Scott
it broke a crankshaft, and I guess that was basically due to too much weight a little further out on the one side. And so.
If you look at engines that haven't been adapted, that crankshaft is hanging way out there, and he sucked it in by the engine. I talked to Ralph's son, Cy, and he said they moved a house into Dalton with that engine, and the clutch kind of started to slip, and they had a little ways to go. And this house is just on the east side of town, so he said his dad got a chain out and chained up the clutch, and they pulled it the rest of the way in. But that was a common thing, too, wasn't it? Moving houses, moving barns.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Glenn, talk about this separator here.
Well, that's a 40-inch wing feeder Minneapolis separator, and they were great for stack threshing because you could take those wing feeders and put them out over the stack, so they actually would be almost on the center of the stack, and they'd pitch 2 guys on each wing feeder. So they usually always had at least 4 guys pitching in.
And that was all those guys could handle too, wasn't it? I mean, they'd...
Oh yeah, you could pitch just about as fast as you wanted to.
You don't see big machines like this very often, do you, Glenn?
No, I guess they made a few bigger than that, but the 40-inch was about as big as you ever saw in this area.
Talk about your dad and his love for steam too, and you still own an engine as well, but he worked with it all the time, and did he think it was the cat's meow, the best thing out there at the time?
Oh, he always said steam should have never been abandoned as a power because it was the finest power that was ever invented. Because he said steam is live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And here you see some of the ladies there.
Yes. I think that was my mother was one of them there. they served coffee, as they always did back in the threshing days.
I've talked to Margaret Bradfold, Kenneth's wife, and he said, or she said that she had to run home, across to their place, and to cook more bars than that, because it was kind of expected, too, wasn't it, Glenn, that we're going to have coffee?
Oh, absolutely.
You see some of the kids
There
there.
are a lot of the present day adults are in that wagon box there.
Get a good look at the crowd there, and that Woods Brothers engine too is a pretty rare one. Woods Brothers company only made about 420 some steam engines, and that's one of the bigger Woods Brothers you'll see out there. You'll see a 16 or an 18, but a 25 is hard to come here. There's the ladies with their porcelain kettles. You like those, Mike?
Coffee pots.
Yep.
Coffee pots.
Yep.
Yeah,
They had egg coffee, no doubt.
no doubt.
Oh,
the
yes.
best. Yeah.
We always called it Ladies' Aid Coffee.
Yeah, okay. Well, just, more than just the machinery too. It's the people, isn't it, Glenn? The people that you would meet.
Oh, absolutely. Those people that came to those very early shows, they all remembered those days, and they drove for miles to just come and watch it for a couple of hours, because it was such a thrill for them to see that engine and threshing machine operating again, and that's straw stack growing.
I heard some of the early advertising too. It'd say, "Look for the smoke."
Yeah.
Just look for the smoke. And look at those straw piles too. And
Yeah.
how many acres were you thrashing here?
Well, I think it would have been the off from about 40 acres of grain.
Okay. Now, Glenn, I think in Wayne here, this is moving over to, I believe, by the Zion Church, where that's located now, north of Dalton's. And the show moved over there. Was it maybe in its third or fourth year?
I believe it was a fourth year, either the third or fourth.
And I think there were a few more engines added, later on too. There was a 25-horse Nichols and Shepherd that came along. There's a great story about the Dalton Creamery too, where there was an explosion in the creamery. There was a boiler explosion. They actually brought a steam engine in, and Ralph Melby and Nels Fusson ran the creamery off a traction engine.
Mm-hmm.
It was Nels Fosson's, he had a Nichols and Shepherd for a while, and that's the one that they used at the creamery.
This is kind of a neat sawmill here too. This is this Jackson lumber mill that came out of Wisconsin, where you'd ride on the carriage, and it was kind of a novelty, and it traveled to a lot of different shows.
I believe that was a man by the name of Larson that owned that one.
Lloyd Larson from
Lloyd
Alexandria.
Larson, yep.
Looks like the engine there is the 25 single, Gar Scott running that. And, just look at that nice long belt and humming around there. Yeah.
There was always something interesting. I saw him do it when I had the Gar Scott on the sawmill at home. We ran a straight belt on it. It wasn't quite that long, and I ran a straight belt. And the old guys, a lot of them chewed Copenhagen snuff, and they would take the tin cover off a box of Copenhagen snuff and drop it on the belt in front of the flywheel, and it would go around the flywheel on the belt, and they'd pick it up off the ground and put it right back on the Copenhagen box. It just never altered the shape of it one bit.
Wow. They were belted up
It was
straight.
hard to believe that could ever
right?
happen, but I saw it done
darn.
several times.
And here you see, must have been post-show days there, kind of. A lot of times too, Glenn, when the show was over, there was still some thrashing to do, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, quite often if it rained, especially, so you got delayed. Yeah.
There's a 25-85 single, Nichols and Shepherd. Was that Fusson's engine?
It could have been. It looked like it could have been. Look at the rainbow there on that.
Beautiful shot there. There's the aftermath of another show, and I believe here you're looking at, again, north of Dalton, County Road 35 north, and it looks like you hauled in some concession stands and things too.
Yep. Cook shacks, we used to call them.
It's interesting too to see the different automobiles and trucks, of that vintage, and brings back a lot of memories from my teenage years, So, but the stack thrashing that you see here isn't done anymore, basically because you don't have anybody that knows how to build a stack. It wasn't an easy job either.
Oh no. I used to have two men were great grain stackers. Ephraim Evald was the last one. He did it for many years until he was about 82 years old, I believe.
You didn't have to worry about exercise programs then. You got
Nope.
your exercise on the end of a fork.
No doubt about it. And the
Or a shovel.
kids would play in the straw pile.
Yeah, they still do that.
No, these separators too, watching them run too, and there's a lot of moving parts. But you know, when you look at them, it's looking like the back end of a combine, isn't it?
Oh sure, the inside of them.
Basically,
Of course, the
that's-
new combines, they went to rotors, but
Here's a 75 horse case, and that was Kenneth Bradfold's engine, wasn't it? One of his first engines.
yes, he had a 75.
Yeah. They're on the pony brake now, and you'll see the fellows in the white hat here and screwing down, putting more foot-pounds on that. And you'll see the belt start to flap. And what I love about these pictures, too, people dressed up when they went to these shows, didn't they?
Oh yes, all the original engineers always wore a white engineer's cap.
Is that right?
That looks like the 25 Woods brothers on the teeter-totter again. And that engine sawed a lot of lumber out in St. Olaf Township, too, didn't it? Right by Sewell Lake.
Yes.
Yeah. And later was sold to Milton Martinson, and now and then Clarence Martinson and Roy Martinson, so it stayed in the family. Here's a 25 horse Nichols and Shepard, and this was another engine that Kenneth Bradfold owned too. I believe now resides in Albany. And I don't know, I've heard a lot of big diesel engines run and different things, but when you hear an engine pulling hard at full steam, it gets your heart pumping, doesn't it?
That's a
Just-
great
just
sound.
Nothing like it.
No.
No, there's just nothing like it, you know, and that sound is fast disappearing, you know, so we need to appreciate building some of those memories now, and the youngsters of today can have something to think about in the future, and the old folks coming back get a chance to relive some of their experiences. Maybe they appreciate not having to be on the end of the fork too. You know, let somebody else do it.
But I loved pitching bundles into those old machines. I left my newly wed wife down the cities and went home for the very first show on 1954 and pitched bundles into that thing.
She didn't quite understand it.
She
maybe.
never let me forget that.
I got to tell you something too, Glenn. When I was dating my wife Sarah before we were married, I made her clean out, or asked her, "Would you mind cleaning out flues in the little case steamer?" and she did. But I think there's a good future with steam too. You know, there is safety as a priority with our show and other shows with the state of Minnesota too, and there's also younger guys now that are starting to build and or work on more so, kind of a new generation too.
Yeah, you won't find so many of them, but those that are interested are intensely interested, it seems like nowadays.
It wasn't that you were on the farm and you had to learn because Dad wanted you to. Now it's because you want to know something new, something different,
Right.
something that nobody else can do. And the steam license, it also applies to the stationary plants that are in a lot of commercial buildings too. So that license is usable for many different purposes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, the kids are looking for quarters, maybe,
Yeah. It's
or having fun anyway.
one of the other things I wanted to mention too, growing up around Dalton as a pretty little kid hanging down the thrashing grounds. These guys used those engines for everything, didn't they, Glenn? Time to grade the grounds or
That
move.
was Uncle Ralph.
There was Ralph, okay. But they would always be running them or using them, weren't they?
Oh yeah, they used them for pulling stumps in the early days, and
Some more shots of cars in the background too. Amazing how many people showed up, and we saw some earlier too. Now here's an interesting clip here, Glenn and Wayne. Steam engine guys and tractor guys alike too, they know where those diamonds are in the rough. But Glenn, talk about this one a little bit here.
well, I think that one was very likely up somewhere in the Park Rapids area. I know there were a couple of operating up there for many years after where the ones around here were out of business.
And that's a Reeves, a double cylinder Reeves, maybe a 16 or a 20 horse. We do have a 32 horse Reeves down on the grounds, which broke, they'd say, thousands of acres of virgin sod in Montana. Now we're back to the Melby farm again here, huh?
Yeah,
like your home place?
That's right. That's right on the north side of the buildings. Yeah.
Just again, look at all the people. I mean, just amazing that they were able to see this again. Huh?
Yeah, it's mostly just by word of mouth. You know, they go back to Dalton or Ashby and tell them they're threshing out there with a steam engine at the Melby farm, and they kept coming and going all day.
There's the engine that you and your son Mike own now. We just saw it go by too.
That's right.
Yeah. There we see another Nichols and Shepherd. And Glenn, talk a little bit about your engine again too. And we see on some of the Melby engines too, they had that wider stack on the top. Did your dad and Ralph really like that?
Kind of the bell. Well, apparently they liked the sound of it. It changed. They altered the sound just a little bit.
Okay.
There's Kenneth Bratful's home right across the slough there, as you can see.
And that's where his wife Margaret went to get more food. She said she had to go home and bake some more bars. Here's the advanced plowing again, and you see the pop-off valve there. Do you recall what that popped off at back in those days, Glenn?
Not sure. I would guess it would have been about 150 to 60.
What are we running today now? We're down about 120?
Oh, most of them are at 100. Some down to 100, but some of them 125, 35.
So that makes a tremendous difference in the amount of pulling power that they can produce simply because of less steam pressure.
Oh, man.
This is Richard and David Ackerman's engine now. They'd be grandsons to your dad. And I believe right now they're running 135 still. And we are really blessed at our show still with a number of good running engines, aren't we, Glenn?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
I've got that one, that 25 Garscott single that I've got. You know, my dad bought that in 1923, I believe it was, and it's been in the family continuously ever since. And I've got that up at Larson Welding in Fargo, getting some work done on it now.
There's the pony brake again, and there's the that's 25 double there without a canopy, it looks like to me. So I'm seeing the crankshaft lying over in the middle. And there's a great shot. That's what you see when you're the engineer, right, Glenn?
Yep.
Tell me on these thrashing crews, was that the job you wanted, Glenn, the engineer?
Well,
you know,
you had to be very ambitious because you had to be up very early in the morning and get that fire started, get the fluids cleaned, and oil it all up, and be ready to go. It wasn't the easiest job in the world, I can tell you that.
I've heard stories too about on some of these thrashing runs and having to move those machines in October and even some of those cold nights.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn and Mark, we certainly want to thank you for adding to the narration here, and so